Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about something that challenges every single belief you've ever been taught about love, relationships, and emotional attachment, especially as a woman. Let's talk about why some women can have everything. They're beautiful, loyal, loving, and still get treated like an option, while others, the ones who walk away, end up being unforgettable. Yes, unforgettable. Because here's the truth that we all need to hear loud and clear: men fall deeply for women who leave. Not because they want heartbreak, not because they enjoy loss, but because leaving sends a message that no words ever could. It says, "I choose me," and that is power. You see, when a woman has the strength to walk away from what doesn't serve her, she becomes more than just a partner. She becomes a standard, a reflection of what self-respect looks like. And in a world where too many people chase love with desperation, where begging for attention is normalized, the woman who can leave calmly, gracefully, without drama, becomes unforgettable. Because she didn't cry for closure. She didn't chase after empty promises. She didn't scream, "Why don't you love me?" She just left. The power of walking away is one of the most misunderstood strengths a woman can possess, yet it is often the most defining. When a woman chooses to walk away, not out of bitterness, not to manipulate, but from a place of deep self-worth, she sends a message louder than any plea, louder than any argument. She values herself more than she fears losing someone. That kind of quiet confidence is not just attractive, it's magnetic. It signals to a man that she is not bound by desperation or fear, but led by principle and inner security. While some people may believe love is proven through staying no matter what, the truth is, the ability to leave when you are no longer being seen, heard, or respected is one of the clearest declarations of self-love. It shows she is not emotionally dependent on being chosen. She's already chosen herself. When a woman knows her worth, she doesn't have to explain why she won't settle. Her actions say it all. And one of the most powerful actions she can take is to walk away from a situation that no longer aligns with her standards. This isn't about being cold. It's not about withholding love. It's about understanding that staying in a space where your value isn't being recognized slowly chips away at your soul. Women who walk away aren't emotionless. In fact, they often care deeply. But they've learned that love, when not returned or respected, is not enough to justify staying. And that decision to leave is often what awakens the other person. It introduces a man to a rare kind of woman, one who doesn't stay just because she's emotionally attached, but one who lives by a code of self-respect. That's powerful and rare. And because it's rare, it has lasting impact. Men are used to a cycle of conflict, begging, compromise, repeat. They're not used to someone who simply chooses peace over pain, standards over potential, clarity over confusion. And the moment a man meets a woman who refuses to abandon herself for the sake of the relationship, something shifts. It forces him to see her in a different light. She's no longer just the girlfriend, the partner, or the option. She becomes the one that got away, not because she vanished mysteriously, but because she stood in her truth. Because she chose dignity over drama. That moment of walking away also highlights another truth. Real connection doesn't need to be chased. It doesn't beg for validation. It flows when both people are willing to show up with respect and commitment. When a woman walks, it's often because she's done all she could. She's spoken, she's tried, and now her absence will speak where her words no longer reached. It's not meant to hurt him, but it often does. Not because she caused him pain, but because her exit removes the comfort he once had. Her presence, once overlooked, suddenly becomes painfully noticeable. That's the irony of walking away. When she's there every day, her love is assumed. When she's gone, its absence is deafening. Men remember the woman who left with grace. The one who didn't scream or beg, but simply said with her actions, "I won't keep investing in something that no longer invests in me." And that's what leaves a mark, not the dramatic goodbye, but the self-assured silence. The kind of silence that speaks of deep reflection and personal evolution. Because a woman who walks away doesn't just leave the man behind, she steps into a higher version of herself. She reclaims her time, her energy, her peace. In that transformation, men often begin to see what they had only glimpsed before. The woman who walked away becomes larger in their memory than she ever was in their presence. Why? Because she stood out in a world full of people who cling. Because she had the courage to do what many fear, leave before she completely lost herself. And in doing so, she earned something more lasting than love given too easily. She earned respect. And that's why walking away is not weakness. It's one of the strongest decisions a woman can make. And that strength is exactly why men fall deeply, and sometimes permanently, for women who have the power to walk away. Detachment is one of the most underestimated forces in attraction. It may seem counterintuitive, but the moment a woman becomes emotionally detached, not cold or uncaring, but emotionally self-sufficient, is the moment she often becomes most desirable. Why? Because emotional detachment isn't a lack of love. It's the refusal to settle for a love that doesn't serve her. A woman who doesn't need constant validation, who doesn't chase, who isn't afraid of being alone, radiates something very rare: independence and mystery. And mystery is not about playing games. It's about having a life, a sense of purpose, and a mindset that doesn't revolve around someone else's attention. That energy is attractive because it pulls rather than pushes. It invites curiosity rather than demanding answers. A man starts to lean in, not because she's withholding, but because she clearly doesn't need him to feel complete. When a woman is detached, she isn't looking to be chosen. She's evaluating who's worthy of choosing her. That shift in energy changes everything. Men sense when a woman is emotionally centered. They sense when she's not dependent on the outcome of the relationship to define her happiness. And because so many people are used to the opposite, emotional overextension, anxiety, fear of abandonment, a woman who is calm, clear, and willing to walk away becomes a different experience. She's not looking to fix anyone. She's not trying to be rescued. She's already whole. That internal confidence communicates far more than words ever could. It says, "I like you, but I'll be just fine without you." That kind of self-contained energy creates intrigue. It makes a man stop and think, why doesn't she need anything from me? Why does she feel so peaceful on her own? And in that curiosity, emotional investment begins. Unlike desperation, which repels, detachment draws people in. It's not the silence of indifference. It's the stillness of someone who knows what they bring to the table. A woman who's detached doesn't get shaken easily. She doesn't overreact to small delays. She doesn't interrogate to feel secure. She doesn't try to control what isn't flowing. Instead, she pays attention. She observes. And when something feels off, she doesn't try to force it to work. She simply withdraws her energy. That behavior teaches a man something critical: her attention is earned, not owed. Her emotional availability is not unlimited. It's conditional on how she's treated. And once a man understands that, the entire dynamic changes. He begins to invest more because he realizes he's not the center of her world. He's a part of it, and only if he aligns with the peace she's created. Men don't just fall for beauty or chemistry. They fall for women who are in control of their emotional world. Detachment shows that control. It communicates without words. I'm here because I want to be, not because I have to be. And that freedom creates space for true connection. It's not built on fear of loss or anxiety about where things are headed. It's built on choice. And that's the most powerful position you can be in: to love without attachment, to give without fear, and to walk away without regret. What detachment ultimately does is shift the power, not in a manipulative way, but in a grounded way. It puts the woman back in the seat of her own life, not waiting for someone to validate her value. And men sense that. They respect it. They're drawn to it because it challenges them. It raises the standard. It forces them to level up emotionally. And not every man will respond positively to that. Some will walk away. But the right man, the one who values depth, alignment, and emotional maturity, will feel a magnetic pull toward it. Because deep down, everyone is looking for someone who doesn't need them, but chooses them. And detachment is what makes that possible. This is why women who don't chase, who don't force, who stay emotionally clear and calm, often become the ones that linger in a man's heart long after others have faded from memory. Not because they tried harder, but because they didn't try at all. They just showed up as they are, whole, confident, present, and willing to leave if the energy wasn't right. That's what makes a man fall, not just for the woman, but for the peace she brings, and the boundaries she won't cross, not even for love. Self-respect is one of the most magnetic qualities a woman can embody. It's not just a mindset, it's a presence. It's the silent confidence that doesn't need validation, the quiet strength that doesn't chase attention, and the calm certainty that speaks louder than any demand or plea ever could. When a woman truly respects herself, she naturally raises the standard for how others treat her. She doesn't need to lecture, warn, or beg. Her boundaries are clear simply through how she carries herself, and men notice that immediately. They sense that they can't get away with half-effort, vague words, or inconsistent behavior. She becomes someone they feel compelled to show up for fully, because anything less will be dismissed without drama, but with finality. A woman with self-respect doesn't wait around to be chosen. She's already chosen herself. She doesn't lose herself in a relationship because her identity isn't dependent on being loved by someone else. She brings a complete version of herself into the connection and expects the same in return. That's what sets her apart. In a world full of people lowering their standards just to keep someone close, the woman who won't settle becomes a rare experience. And rarity creates value. Men might not understand it at first. They might even test the waters, see how much they can get away with, how flexible she'll be, how long she'll tolerate unclear intentions. But when they realize she doesn't play that game, when they see that she'd rather be alone than be disrespected, it triggers something deep within them. It forces them to confront the difference between attraction and admiration. They may be attracted to many, but they admire the one who won't bend just to be kept. It's not about being difficult or demanding. Self-respect doesn't come with arrogance. It comes with grace. It's not about being perfect either. It's about being aware of your value and not allowing anyone to bargain it down. When a woman walks through life with that mindset, she doesn't just attract love, she inspires better love. She becomes the mirror that shows a man what he needs to become if he wants to meet her where she is. Her energy sets the tone. She doesn't chase closure. She doesn't need to be convinced. If she feels disregarded, she'll disengage. Not because she's cold, but because she knows staying in situations that diminish her only teaches others that it's acceptable to do so. Men fall deeply for women with self-respect not because they're unattainable, but because they're unshakable. There's a big difference. Unattainable feels distant and cold. Unshakable feels warm but secure. She welcomes love, but she never begs for it. She appreciates kindness, but doesn't cling to it when it's inconsistent. She can love deeply, but she will never abandon herself in the process. That emotional steadiness is rare, and for men who are used to emotional chaos or codependency, encountering a woman who doesn't fall into those patterns is both disarming and unforgettable. She becomes someone they remember not for how she made them feel in fleeting moments, but for how she carried herself in the moments that mattered most. When things got uncertain, she didn't panic, she observed. When things felt off, she didn't attack, she distanced. And when things crossed her boundaries, she didn't argue, she left. That behavior creates lasting impact because it's not fueled by ego or revenge, it's powered by self-respect. And that kind of energy lingers. It leaves a man questioning not her, but himself. Was I enough for someone like her? Why couldn't I meet her where she was? What did she see in herself that I failed to honor? The answers to those questions often become the catalyst for deep internal change. And whether or not the man returns, one thing remains true. The woman who respected herself enough to walk away from less than she deserves will always hold a special place in his memory. Not because she made him chase, but because she made him reflect. Because she stood for something. Because she knew her worth, and she refused to settle for anything less than love that matched her value. That's the woman who stays in his heart long after the others have faded. That's the kind of woman a man doesn't just want to love. He wants to become better for. The fear of loss is one of the most powerful emotional triggers in human psychology, especially in relationships. When something we once had is suddenly gone, our perception of its value often skyrockets. This principle is no different in romantic dynamics. When a woman decides to walk away, when she chooses to remove herself from a relationship or situation where she was not being valued, something shifts in the mind of the man she left. In the silence that follows her absence, he begins to truly process what he had, what he didn't nurture, and what he might never have again. This fear of loss isn't just about losing someone physically, it's about losing access to emotional safety, authenticity, and connection that he didn't fully appreciate when it was there. Men don't always recognize the depth of a woman's presence while she's still in their life, especially if she gave freely. Her time, her support, her affection, it becomes easy to mistake that consistency is something guaranteed. But when she pulls away, when her calls stop, when her energy no longer fills the room, that space she once occupied becomes uncomfortably empty. That emptiness has weight. It's in that void that realization begins. What was once background noise becomes the loudest silence he's ever heard, and what he once considered ordinary becomes irreplaceable. The fear of loss, however, only hits with such force when the woman who walked away had real substance. When she was the kind of woman who brought more than just beauty or attraction to the table. When she offered emotional depth, understanding, and strength. Her departure creates a ripple effect that penetrates far deeper than surface emotions. She wasn't just someone to pass time with. She was someone who made him feel seen, someone who challenged him, someone who stood by him but refused to be stepped on. That balance of love and boundaries makes her unforgettable, and once she's gone, that absence becomes a mirror. He's forced to look at himself, not just her, not just what she did or didn't do, but what he failed to see, to protect, or to fight for. There's a difference between being left by someone who tolerated everything and someone who had the courage to walk away because she expected more. The first might leave a bruise to the ego. The second leaves an imprint on the soul. That's because she didn't leave to prove a point. She left because she had won. She didn't make a dramatic exit. She made a clear decision. And that decision was rooted in self-worth. The man she left behind may try to fill that space with distractions, with temporary flings, with ego-driven rebounds, but none of it compares to the woman who left a mark through her quiet strength. The fear of losing her often becomes the turning point. It becomes the moment he rewinds every memory, replays every conversation, and realizes that what he had wasn't ordinary, it was rare. And in some cases, it's too late. The door she closed doesn't always reopen. But even if she's never physically present again, the version of her that walked away stays in his memory, shaping how he views women, relationships, and even himself. That's how deeply a woman who knows her worth can affect a man. What's often misunderstood is that the fear of loss isn't about control or manipulation. It's about contrast. When you've been in the presence of real love and then that love is gone, the emotional contrast hits harder than any lecture or ultimatum ever could. A man may not change when you cry, when you beg, or when you wait, but he will think deeply when you leave. Because that's when he sees, sometimes for the first time, who you truly were, the nurturing presence, the emotional anchor, the safe space, the one who loved him, not blindly but bravely. When a woman walks away without bitterness, just clarity, she doesn't create chaos, she creates awakening, and that awakening often leads to regret. Regret that he didn't do better, regret that he didn't hold on tighter, regret that he only saw her full value when she was no longer standing there. That's the sting of the fear of loss. It's not just about missing someone. It's about realizing you might have pushed away the very thing your heart needed most. And by then, she's already gone, not just in body, but in spirit. And that's when a man falls the hardest, when he realizes he lost a woman who would have stayed, if only he had given her a reason to. Leaving is often misunderstood. Many associate it with failure, weakness, or giving up. But in truth, When a woman decides to walk away from something that no longer serves her, it's not a sign of loss. It's a moment of leadership. She's not quitting. She's choosing a path that honors her worth, her peace, and her emotional well-being. That kind of decision doesn't come from impulsiveness. It comes from deep clarity. A woman who leaves isn't running away from love. She's moving towards self-respect. She's choosing to no longer stay in a space where she's undervalued, overlooked, or emotionally drained. And that choice, though often painful, is also powerful, because she's no longer waiting to be treated right. She's deciding what kind of treatment she will and will not accept. Leadership in this context means setting the tone, not just for herself, but for everyone who interacts with her. It sends a message to the world: this is how I expect to be loved. And if I don't receive that, I will not stay. That message isn't spoken through anger or ultimatums. It's communicated through action. And action is always more memorable than words. The woman who leads by walking away teaches by example. She doesn't just talk about boundaries, she lives them. She doesn't preach about self-worth, she embodies it. And in doing so, she gives others, especially the men she leaves behind, a model of strength that they can't forget. It's easy to stay. It's easy to make excuses, to hope, to keep giving chances. What's hard is drawing a line and saying, no more. It's hard to walk away when your heart still wants to stay. But that difficulty is what makes it admirable, because it means she's willing to feel discomfort in the short term in order to protect her long-term peace. And that's leadership in its truest form, choosing alignment over attachment, choosing clarity over chaos, choosing to let go rather than holding on to something that slowly erodes her spirit. Men often don't expect a woman to leave, especially not the woman who gave so much, the one who supported him through his lowest moments, the one who believed in his potential even when he didn't see it himself. But when she leaves, it's not because she stopped loving him, it's because she finally started loving herself enough to know she deserves more than just potential. She deserves presence. She deserves consistency. She deserves effort. Her departure becomes a wake-up call. It forces him to see what she truly stood for. It shows him that love isn't just about how much someone can give. It's about whether that love is honored and reciprocated. Her strength becomes a mirror, a reflection of what she needed and what he failed to provide. And in that reflection, he often sees his own shortcomings more clearly than ever before. That's the emotional impact of a woman who leads by leaving. She doesn't need to raise her voice, create drama, or make threats. Her decision is the lesson. Her absence becomes the teaching tool. And the respect that wasn't given while she stayed often floods in after she's gone. What makes her unforgettable isn't just that she left, but how she left, with dignity, with self-awareness, with a calm that says, I know who I am, and I won't shrink myself to fit where I no longer belong. That's not rebellion, that's leadership. That's a woman stepping into her highest self, not to punish someone else, but to protect her own energy. And that energy leaves a lasting impression. It shifts the emotional atmosphere. It creates a new standard, not just for her next relationship, but sometimes even for the man she walked away from. Because once a man experiences that kind of woman, the one who knows her value and isn't afraid to walk alone, he starts to measure others against her, not out of longing or fantasy, but because she redefined what strength and self-worth look like. She didn't ask for change, she became the change. She didn't wait for better treatment. She demanded it with her absence. That's the essence of leading by leaving. It's not about abandonment. It's about choosing elevation. And that choice, made from self-respect rather than bitterness, often sparks transformation far beyond the moment she walked away. A woman who walks away doesn't lose anything that truly belonged to her. She steps into a version of herself that had been waiting for the right moment to emerge. Too often, leaving is seen as defeat, as though choosing to exit a relationship or situation is giving up. But in reality, when a woman decides to stop chasing love that's not reciprocated or stop explaining herself to someone who refuses to understand, she's not losing, she's leading. She's taking control of her story. She's refusing to be written by someone else's neglect, confusion, or indecision. That decision is not born out of arrogance or spite. It comes from the deepest kind of self-awareness, the kind that says, I matter too. Leadership here is quiet. It doesn't look like loud declarations or dramatic exits. It's often subtle but firm. It's a woman finally saying, this version of me, the one who tolerated, overcompensated, and waited, is no longer in charge. And that shift is powerful. It creates an entirely new dynamic, not just between her and others, but within herself. Because something changes when a woman chooses herself. She begins to operate from a place of strength, not survival. She no longer needs to earn love through overextending. She realizes she is the value, and she no longer has to convince someone to see it. This kind of emotional leadership reshapes how others view her, especially men, because she becomes the standard they didn't know they needed to meet. She's not chasing affection, approval, or promises. She's not waiting for potential to evolve into consistency. She's simply stepping into a space where she can breathe, where she's not shrinking just to be accepted. And that act, walking away from a dynamic that no longer aligns with her truth, is the most powerful form of clarity there is. Clarity that says, if it costs me my peace, it's too expensive. Men often don't realize what they had until the woman who once gave everything no longer gives it all. But what affects them even more than her absence is the version of her they never fully saw while she was around. The version that didn't need them, that didn't stay out of fear, that wasn't there just to make them feel comfortable. That version was always there, underneath the compromises and emotional labor, waiting for the moment she would decide enough. When she finally does, it's not just a break, it's a breakthrough. And that breakthrough sends a message. One that echoes long after the conversations have ended or the doors have closed. It says, I've remembered who I am. That remembrance becomes the light that guides her forward and the shadow that lingers in the mind of the man who let her go. Because the truth is, men often remember the woman who left more than the one who stayed through it all. Not because staying isn't valuable, but because leaving shows a strength they didn't expect. It challenges their assumptions. It confronts their complacency. And in that confrontation, something deeper is awakened, a sense of loss, yes, but also a new understanding of what real love should feel like. A woman who walks away with self-respect isn't just doing it for herself. She's modeling something bigger. She's showing others, men, women, even the next generation, that love should never come at the cost of self. That loyalty is noble, but not when it becomes self-betrayal. That emotional maturity sometimes means choosing to walk alone rather than staying in a room where you're constantly explaining your worth. And what happens next? She doesn't look back with regret. She grows. She heals. She reclaims the parts of herself that were slowly dimmed. She becomes more aligned with who she was always meant to be. The more she leads herself, the more others begin to follow, not in dependency, but in respect. She's not waiting to be rescued. She's building a life that doesn't require rescue. She's not proving anything to anyone. Her existence becomes the proof. That's why men fall so deeply for women who leave. Because in doing so, she doesn't just walk away from him. She walks into herself. She rises in a way that's impossible to ignore. And even if he never says it out loud, he sees it. He feels it. And he knows she didn't leave because she was weak. She left because she was finally strong enough to lead. So ladies and gentlemen, understand this. When a woman walks away, she's not being cold, dramatic, or heartless. She's being powerful. She's showing the highest form of self-love, the courage to choose herself when others don't. She becomes unforgettable not because she played games, but because she stopped playing small. And that strength, that peace, that self-respect, that's what makes men fall deeply, completely, and often permanently. Because she didn't leave to make a statement. She was the statement. And in walking away, she didn't just end something. She became someone. Thank you.